to new locations within the limits of the town highway, aka Jenneville Road. So as David mentioned, right now it's a very challenging line for us. So overall, as we manage our transmission distribution plant, we look for projects like this. They're a little older plant, if you will, and extremely cross-country, very challenging to get to, projects that have been hardened probably as much as can be, but then we look statistically at when we have outages in certain areas and what it takes to muster the resources to go address those outages, and in particular some of these areas where the terrain, the ledges are very challenging. As the plant gets older, it makes less sense to try and replace and maintain that. And moving toward or moving into the road corridor, again, is sort of a hallmark of ours that we're going forward with. Again, existing utility corridor, it's usually a good match, with other infrastructure, obviously serves our customers well. But again, once that plant is moved roadside, the premise really is that everything from that point forward, once it's constructed, all the maintenance and care of that line, trouble, what have you, is all done from the road, from a bucket. One of the adaptations that we are now using wherever possible is undergrounding. Sort of bury it and forget it, if you will. We have a technique we're proposing here in a couple of the different locations called cable and conduit. So it's really a one-piece installation, the wire, the conductor, surrounded by a conduit material where there's three different methodologies we can use to bury that with a vibrating plow, or you can conventionally open a trench and put it together with conduit and pull it through, or you can directional bore it. In this case, just given the lay of the land and the couple of areas that we want to propose this, a couple of open spots, landowners have agreed to allow us to bury a couple of the sections of line here. That's mostly what we've met with Dave in the field, just to again look at the sort of the hierarchy of progression of what we look at when we go through there, and we're looking at resources and offsets, and really trying to maintain the natural character, natural features, anywhere within streams or 100-year floodplain. Again, not disrupting the character, the flow, the regime in any way, shape, or form. So in this case, again, we would not be casting anything in concrete. So in a couple of these locations, there is currently above ground plant in these locations that would come down in favor of the cable and conduit. So basically, taking down the overhead and coming closer to the roadside. So again, once it's underground, doesn't need to be maintained, but this is a combination, given the terrain that we have here, that we're going to be going overhead and underground to accomplish our goals. And like I said, in exchange or netting of that, we're going to be retiring a couple of cross-country sections of this line that that land reverts back to the landowners, and those easements, that land ultimately goes fallow. So that's sort of the gist of how we're approaching this project, how we look at it. Like I said, we have the challenging line, we have an existing road corridor. Is there a match? And as Dave mentioned, we've been out here a number of times. Having a look at that, in particular the spot by Lulls Brook and Katy Brook, where we discussed, a future road project in a particularly sensitive area, from the days of Irene. But I believe that we've come to terms in terms of giving Dave the comfort that the methodologies that we're proposing here, obviously based on landowner permission, that the way we're proposing this project should, provide a good outcome.
You good for questions?
Absolutely.
So it sounds like you've already talked to all the landowners in that area where the lines are going to change?
Correct.
Okay.
So all the easements, right. So as the progression is, basically we'll come out, stake it out, go door to door, get that entitlement, and then we're ready to go forward with any sort of permitting.
Okay. So any major concerns right now from the landowners?
No.
Okay. And then I guess the other question is there a lot of tree clearing that has to happen?
In these
for the above
two locations, no. And again, it's a good fit for it. Doing a conventional vibratory, plowing of this, it's essentially, kind of a ditch witch, if you will. And right across the field and it goes right up. So, no clearing, along the road, they'll be trimming in the canopy for sure.
Yeah.
But, our BMP practices are trim first, whole tree removal last, but a lot of focus also is what goes on the ground level of vegetation as well, and not, unnecessarily clearing. So again, focused only on the work location.
And your markers that are out there now, where so you see like a P28, that's where a pole will be going. Right.
So you mentioned it's in the ground, no maintenance needed. How is that physically possible?
So we'll bring the line overhead, there'll be a pole and then a riser pole, and the conduit will feed directly down in, and it's just one continuous. So there's this continuous line, so there's no, it's not going to fall. Certainly someone could dig into it and create an issue, but
But it must be, the physical properties of that line will degrade over time.
not that we are aware of in terms of, there's underground utilities everywhere. I mean, it's a common practice for us, so
I
am
know.
not aware of it. We're not gonna bury it in the water table or anything like that, so it's just, we bury it to about frost line, and
It's good for 100 years?
it's good until we need to change it out.
Until we have
If ever-
wireless
if ever-
electricity.
Huh?
Until we have wireless electricity.
Yeah, I mean, it's just interesting that it's considered maintenance-free. I've never heard of anything that's maintenance-free.
Theoretically, your transmission in your car is maintenance-free, if you want to believe that.
Yeah, theoretically.
I mean, there's termination points and so forth, and again, there are points, again, where a line can fall, but typically if you put it in a continuous run underground, it's one continuous piece of line, so we're not,
Nothing ever gets in there, water never gets in.
it's watertight.
It's sealed.
Okay. Could go to the moon, I guess. All right.
High tech.
Yeah. All right. That's interesting.
It's the, sort of the wave of the future, it's something that, we look at what other utilities do around the region and around in the country, and, again, it's a great way, easy install.
3 corners. It was before its time.
Yeah,
That's all I'm gonna say.
apparently once it's in there, that's it, forever. Okay. All right, you can, as it comes up out of the ground and there's some kind of breaking point there, you can just pull the wire, right? Is that what you would do?
Right.
Yeah, okay.
You could, in this case, we'd probably vibrate it in and plow it in, but you could just have a riser pull and do a traditional sweep of a conduit on each side and just pull the cable through. We can probably do close to 1,000, feet. This certainly meets the ideal, 500 feet, give or take, on this one. So well within the wheelhouse of the technology.
Yeah, I'm sorry to argue with you. I was just thinking of, like, plastic gets brittle over time, but maybe if it's exposed to oxygen, and so maybe if it's not, then it doesn't, and
Do you have buried power to your house?
no,
No?
I'd love it.
Yeah.
I did it with when we ran power to our house, and it's very select.
Yeah, I think it's
There,
great.
You just roll it in the ditch and bury it.
I'm not questioning that.
Wire, it's not exposed to the sun, so some of the things that you would think, that get on plastics and so forth, is
Yeah.
not exposed to the elements.
And so it's expected to just
Once
last.
it's in tune, correct, and yes,
Okay,
expecting to last.
understood. Thank you.
Tim, you, in the 3 pages of maps that we have that show the project, you have retire old poles at least once or twice.
Yes.
If not more.
Correct.
Can you tell me what that means?
That means vacating the corridor. That means taking all of GMP's plant off and retiring that. And I understand in this case, we also have a co-tenant, and so that's really the intent when we retire the line, is to have that completely removed and moved to the new location.
Can I quote you on that in writing? Because that has not been the practice. You can go right up the Hartland Road, and there are poles sitting by themselves, or poles with other providers on it, and there's a brand new power company pole with a brand new wire on the top. I have that right behind my barn, where the pole fractured. GMP came in to do a temporary fix, put in a new pole, but the other carriers are still on the lower wire, lower pole. So how can you make me feel more comfortable about this?
It is, Dave and I spoke about this at length. I will be honest, this is not the first time I've heard this. It comes across in Act 250 and other discussions with VTrans, some of our other partners out there. In this case, we are making the contact, and we are working diligently with the other person the other company that's co-located on there, that we're moving. The consequence to them not moving is a conversation to be had if they're not willing to come along with us, in terms of really just retiring the pole and quit claiming the right of way to them. Then they own the plant, they own the poles, they own the maintenance and everything that goes along with it. So our intent is for everyone to move when we move. But it's not always, I can't give you a clean answer in terms of our ability to compel somebody that's co-located with us, to move. It's something that we are working on, and we are hearing quite a bit of feedback.
And I can imagine it's confusing from an easement perspective.
Agreed.
If you're removing the easement, but yet there's still a pole there.
Yes, and that's a conversation that comes up, an expectation. Mr. Austin did mention when they go through and get the easements, landowners do ask.
We're talking about 1111 permit tonight, and I'm just wondering, what if we decide to play hardball and say, we're not going to issue that unless we have an agreement from the other carriers?
In that case, we'll go back and we'll have another conversation. Again, Dan has been having most of those conversations, but it's a bigger issue than just the carrier.
I agree. That's why I'm talking about it.
I guess if we are forced into that position by denial of a permit, then that's a talking point that I'll go back to the company with and run up to leadership and say, okay, now we've run into a situation where we need some partnership.
Yeah, and Jim's question before, just to complete it, I'm not sure what that was, but recent work in town on Merritt Road and on Barronville Road. Our citizens who live on that road were appalled at the number of trees and the landscape after the move happened. Now, you mentioned to Jim that there aren't few trees and all that stuff, but again, the eyesore component, when you shear sheep and you do a bad job, you only have to wait a month or two until it grows out. Trees take a long time to sort of come back, or the vegetation comes back. I can't tell from here unless I go and cycle the area and get off my bike and walk. How do we know, you're sitting here tonight and we have to believe you that in fact you'll be taking care of trees and so on, and the landscape?
Well, could you give me a little, I'm relatively new at the company. I've been here for 7 months, so I'm not familiar with all of our projects in the area, so maybe you could give me a little bit more on what's going on Merritt Road. I will say, again, private easements, and landowners agree to certain things, and cutting practices. So I believe we are transparent with landowners when we go and speak with them, requesting easements and so forth. Same thing with talking with the town. So I can only speak to a case-by-case basis. So if you have a particular concern, or if Dave is noted anything while we're out in the field where we can't have trees, or we obviously welcome a field visit, if that were the case. So
I'm happy to take your ride.
Sure.
With you in that part. Jennifer, you have something?
So to Phil's point, I also lived near Barron Hill, and I was also appalled at the change from a road that had a beautiful canopy meeting over it to a bit of a wasteland that's still recovering. As a Conservation Commission member, I've also seen a great increase in invasive plants that have come in because the opening of the light
Mm.
along that. But I guess my question is, with your groups that you work with or who are doing the actual cutting, are there aesthetic guidelines? Are there guidelines besides contacting adjacent landowners, but more about how that work is done?
Well, sure, I think, overall, there's a sort of a hierarchy, I guess, to our vegetation management plan and so forth, in terms of, what species we manage for, what species we're looking, to propagate, height of bushes. So there is a recipe that goes to it when we're looking at, creating a new right-of-way and so forth. And like I said, I think the cutting regimes, it's tough to say, case-by-case basis, not, having been to this project, what the situation was, what the landowners agreed to for the cutting. So
Yeah.
I can assure you that our hierarchy is not, to that, level of cutting unless, again, the project, calls for it, so.
I understand, the long-range benefit of what you're doing. It's just the short-term pieces and the implementation.
But I do understand, and before I worked for the company, I was also a contractor for the company, so I do understand, the stark nature that things can look like when we're gonna cut out and, versus maintained and trimmed, after something's built.
So two quick things.
Sure.
One is, I think if there was cutting, you would be doing it in the town right of way, right? Because you're moving to the town right of way, so you wouldn't be impacting the landowners. Is that a correct assumption?
Believe it, not all of the work is gonna be within
Oh,
the town area. So there are, other easements, that we were granted here,
to get to where you need
to
do you have another co-located utility on those poles? Because I had thought detail already
That's the problem.
buried
Yeah.
in that area.
I think we're still trying to get to the bottom of that.
Oh, gotcha.
Well, I'm vaguely familiar with that stretch of highway. I've been out there once or twice, and near as I can go, when I go by, there ain't a tree there worth saving. Most of them are on their deathbed, so to speak, or are not good, they're dying pines and dying maples and stuff. They'll probably be taken out, and maybe a benefit that they won't fall on me when I'm driving to town, so.
I mean, it wouldn't hurt. It wouldn't
What
hurt to
would?
walk through.
Yeah.
Well, it would hurt you, yeah.
So are we asking for approval of the 1111?
Yeah, we're asking for approval tonight. Actually find this discussion very interesting because some of the things that you were talking about, such as cutting and location and et cetera, kind of dovetails into our own right-of-way permit policy. So just so happens that Green Mountain Power predominantly has come forth to the town in the past when they've been burying utilities. However, I have spoken to Tim and Dan and said, oh geez, by the way, we are looking at a right-of-way policy. The 1111 statute actually says if you're working within the town right-of-way, you need to obtain a permit from the town. So we're gonna get to the right-of-way permit policy in a minute, but it's kind of an extension of statute. I have had a little, and I've spoken with Tim and Dan actually on this, I've had a little bit of discussion with town council. In order to get towards, we need to mature into this a little bit, I think, in order to start writing into moving utility lines to go with, retail has to go with GMP. There's an enforcement mechanism to that, per statute that I put in your packets, there's certain things that they can, if there's delays, they can have certain excuses to delay. Otherwise, they need to get off, but obviously we need to be able to enforce that, have the time and money to do that. It's kind of same kind of goes with the cutting and et cetera. So I think that those are things that we can look at maturing down the road. To be honest with you, I've been talking a little bit about just not Green Mountain Power, but somebody like Brian or the person that wants to bury a utility just across Rice Road or across Grout Road or et cetera. they have generally not, or they've come forward in a very informal way, and I've kind of given you a standard that we've started giving to the resident. Kind of dovetails into a right-of-way or an 1111 permit. So I think that these are things that I think the town should be considering. I think that for this permit here today, I think that this was started a while back. They're pretty far at the end of their discussion on this. I think that some of these discussions that we're having tonight, I think, are for things for us to work towards going forward.
Dave, I do recall that in your manager's report, you have talked about you and Bill spending time on this many hours already. I do do that. And Clyde's observation that maybe the trees are not as much of a concern is good. You know, I do worry about the old poles, you know, those skeletons that seem to carry some carrier that may not even be in existence any longer. But I do appreciate the fact that you've already been negotiating and keeping track of where things are going.
I think I've expressed the opinions that have been brought up tonight pretty well.
All right, thank you. So your conduit, does it have room for other utilities?
No, it's the one piece.
That's it?
That's it.
So right now, VIII is co-located at some places with you.
Only on the telephone pole. We're not underground.
Right, but you're going to go underground. Wouldn't it have been helpful to allow room?
We have invited them,
You have,
yes.
but there's no room in
We
your...
could make, it's again, while we're doing it, we could lay the blank in front of it. So our conductor is a standalone, you know, piece of plant, but we can certainly co-locate in the trench for a partner to come join us.
Or 2 or 3.
You know, so it's a, you know, our line's dedicated, but the trench is not.
Right.
You know, we could certainly have.
And you've invited them and they've not responded or...
So I've been privy to some of these discussions on the section of Jenneville Road in particular that we just kind of ditch line there from Brownsville Road all the way up to Jenneville was one segment that they actually talked about doing prior to this one. And my understanding is there's been a fair amount of communication with VIII about, look, we're doing this now, the boring people are gonna be here. They wouldn't share the same conduit as GMP, but they would be bored 3 feet away or something.
Oh, the other part, we were doing the conduit side of it.
And so far, VIII has bought that. Part of the problem is GMP may be focused on Jenneville Road. VIII could be focused on projects in Bethel. You know, they rarely are in sync as to what the priorities are.
Because with climate change, aren't utilities now going towards burying their wires?
We're doing where we can. I mean, I think, you know, many municipalities are, you know, sort of already on that, you know, path, you know. Some of the places we work are, you know, undergrounding as a first consideration. But, again, it is a conundrum, and it's something that we are talking about consistently. We will certainly be contacting. Again, I think, you know, as Dave pointed out, our capital priorities are not always in line. So we'll certainly when we go for a job like this, you know, we reach out to everybody that's co-located and have these conversations. So it's, conversation's not over, I would say, you know. I mean, as Dave said, you know, there are other parts of this project as well, so we will make another attempt. You know, again, you know, if the board grants this permit, you know, it's another, you know, point of leverage we have to say, okay, now we're approved, now we can move forward. Are you ready now? Is there anything that we can do, you know, to facilitate that? So I think you know, that's kind of where we're headed.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm ready to probably approve it at this point, not sure.
There's nobody gonna approve ordering a pizza.
I'm sorry?
I was hoping they were gonna approve ordering a pizza.
I was thinking calzones.
That's where it's for me.
What's the thinking?
I think, I'm waiting
My
for,
esteemed
maybe
colleagues.
Clyde will make the
Yeah,
motion.
I mean, yeah, I think you have valid concern. If you wanted to do a walkthrough and we do the motion next meeting, that's fine. If you want to do the motion today, that's fine.
Yeah, I'm feeling, let's do a motion, and Tim, I'll be in your office, sitting there.
Sure.
If something should not happen over the next, what is the project time for this?
We can get into it pretty much straight away.
Okay,
I think the intent was to try and get it done before winter.
Oh.
Our designer, Mr. Austin, is out of the country for another week. So certainly maybe
Yeah.
if we want to do a site visit, the week before Thanksgiving is probably,
yeah.
you know,
Yeah, and I have a friend who I spoke to over the weekend and said the easement process went really well, and please pass it because he said the wires were put up in 1947. I have no idea how they know that.
Oh, we have that level of detail, but it also, again, we keep track of all of those stats. It goes to, outages and our ability to respond to those and length of outages and so forth. So it's
Yeah.
definitely a priority for us to, to get that older plant, out of service.
My mother-in-law turned on lights the first time July 8th, 1947. So,
Okay.
I would make the motion that we grant the permit.
Is there a second?
I'll say.
Okay. All in favor? Say
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Green Mountain Power does a good job.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'll sign this and I'll have it recorded and send you off a copy of it.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
The next line you can bury is over Best Road, so I don't lose my power on a regular basis.
All right. Thank you.
Well, then we'll lobby for Brothers Road. Okay, trying to move right along here. The right-of-way, I think to some degree we just dovetailed everything together there.
Yeah, pretty much everything I wanted to kind of state regarding that agenda item was basically just stated. There's been some discussion back and forth on this. I think that the Green Mountain Power permit, I think, highlights what we're doing and the need for essentially just to put the policy into a form, a shape, and understanding for the public, so that they know that they need to come forward and what they may be asked as part of coming forth, and I think that just highlights that.
Okay. So we'll have coming up at a future meeting, these agendas are getting pretty jam-packed, but, legal trails and right-of-way to actually have action on them. We won't do that tonight. Is there any other discussion about right-of-way at this juncture? Okay, I'm getting that glazed look.
Yeah.
Okay, Mary, if you were on to talk about the cemetery piece.
Okay, so I talked about at the top of the meeting was that we have a number of at least 14, maybe 16 cemeteries in town. And the majority of them are closed to additional burials. So it would behoove the residents, I think, if they knew which ones were still open, who to contact, how much a burial plot is. So that's in the future, and hopefully the cemetery committee will do that. But tonight I'm asking that we allow a burial to take place at the Gallup Weed Cemetery, which is still open for burials. It's owned by the town. One thing I don't know, and maybe you know, Clyde, is how much is a burial plot and how is that decided so there's a map that the Historical Society has online of where the current gravestones are. You can clearly see the open space, but is
Yeah.
it surveyed? I mean, is,
No, I doubt it. Of course, when you say there's an open space.
there's
with
nothing there?
No tombstones, but
Right.
it doesn't mean there isn't somebody there.
Oh, okay,
Because if they didn't have a tombstone,
okay.
you know, that's the reason they closed the cemeteries, was because we don't know where's where.
Oh, that's why. Okay.
Now, I think I said that if Nancy and Bill were, their ashes were interred near the front fence, they probably wouldn't run into anybody that was already there.
They wouldn't?
There shouldn't be any I don't think there'd be anybody buried right up close to the fence on the Gallup Cemetery.
Probably is a key word on that.
Right, I mean,
I mean,
how
we'd have
about,
to go out and take a gander.
how about back where Hiram and Lois'
I'm not
plot
sure.
is?
I know they took the furthest
Yeah,
plot in the right-hand corner.
right,
And then maybe, you know, of course, cremation, you're not digging too deep like you do with the body.
but then, okay, then who keeps a record of that plot? Let's say
Okay.
there's a new plot that goes in there, who keeps that record?
Well, if it's a town cemetery, it would be us. And,
Where is that record?
well, the only record that would tell where if you take the Byron Ruggles survey from 1908, he said, starting at the front gate and on the lower side, proceeding up, and he named all the graves, and he printed the epitaphs and everything else on them. And if there was a blank space, he left, you know, room for a blank space. I know, like in Jenneville Cemetery, we have a map. And over here, they have a map, but most of the other cemeteries, you know, basically, unless there is something hiding at the Historical Society, you know, the knowledge is gone of who's where.
So so to set up a policy and have to know where the record is, how do we do that? I guess that's what I'm asking.
I guess we'd have to start with the Ruggles survey, and, you know, you know how big the cemetery is, and you know, well, roughly the size of each grave lot space is usually a 3x8 allowed for a grave.
Oh, okay.
And then I do know, see, at Jenneville, we decided as a group to make new lots in what were the carriage roads that
Yeah.
went through.
Yep.
And I assume in the Gallup, there's a carriage road that goes up through there. You know, because they would have driven the hearse there.
Is it that old, that cemetery?
That cemetery
Yeah.
dates back to the 1800s.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So then,
And if you could get the description from Brian, you could lay it out, you know, roughly where people are. Because he would say to the east, to the right side of the road, left side of the road.
okay, so then is the town clerk the keeper of the records of the cemeteries?
No, well, no, because there were no town cemeteries. They were all basically private cemeteries. You know, every neighborhood would have a cemetery.
Right.
And they'd take care of it, and the state statute says if a cemetery is abandoned, like, you know, like the Gallup one, they turned over the money that they had plus the responsibility of the town. But like the Quaker Cemetery, it's statutory that the town maintain any cemetery in town that does not have a designated person.
Okay, so then, again, how do we keep a record of, there are these plots
Yeah.
in this cemetery that are open, and the size of the plot will be X, Y, and Z, and then the money.
I guess you'd have to do some
Yeah,
research.
I'm a little hesitant, again, this would be a recommendation of the board, because we know so little, to simply say, we're open for business and we'll accept
Mhm.
Yeah.
anybody, you know, hey, we've got 15 spots, you know. I know I've dabbled with this. I'm hearing Clyde speak. I know that the cemetery committee has kind of dabbled with this. Nobody really knows for sure, is the
I know,
answer.
that's the problem, it's
So-
been a problem for
Well-
a number of years.
Darrell Calkins has been working in Danville with their cemeteries
Yep.
and finding where the graves were.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he does it with
There's sonar.
sonar.
Oh, okay.
Oh.
But that's an expensive project,
And there is a
process.
statewide cemetery association.
Mm-hmm.
There was a workshop during one of the VMCTA conferences that I attended, and they discussed that it's very costly to do the sonar work. But there are businesses that you can hire, similar to Darrell Calkins, that will do that site work and designate where there are graves, designate where you could do a burial of a body or a burial of cremation. Because, you gotta take ledge and things like that into consideration.
Oh, and so does the sonar do that too?
The sonar,
Say,
yes, can identify if there is an object there, and can also identify if there's ledge or anything like that, but it's not cheap.
well, we have to find a solution. I mean, this has been a problem for years.
Yeah.
It just keeps going on, and it's not, to me, my mind, acceptable. So,
I know, I mean, it sure sounds, there are so many variables here. One, we're talking about history that isn't necessarily, it's history except for the
1908 was,
sonar sounds very attractive, but what kind of project was that, and are we willing to embark on that for one cemetery, for all the cemeteries?
well, see, most of them are closed. So or I don't know if it's most of them, let's say 2/3 of the cemeteries anyway are closed. So they're out of it anyway.
Yeah.
That's done. Unless for some reason we wanted to employ, the sonar people and see if there's any room in any other ones. But I think it would just be a handful, and we have to find a solution.
But what is the solution we're looking for?
So if I want to be buried in Hartland, what's open?
And
Village cemetery.
where's the open ground?
or Jenneville.
I thought there weren't any left in Jenneville.
Yeah, there are, because we took the carriage roads and we created another 25 burial spots, maybe 100 more. And if you're cremated, you can have like 4 in a single spot,
Okay.
you know.
So I want to particularly find a solution for this former resident.
Yeah.
Okay, so how can we do that?
And they have earmarked one specific cemetery.
Well, she also asked about Weed Cemetery, because they used to live on Cream Pot. So, but Weed's closed, and there's still the Gallup Weed Cemetery up by Cream Pot that's open.
Yeah, I know the cemetery committee is not very active.
No, they're too busy with other stuff, honestly, so I feel that it's a policy issue. I feel like this is our job description to deal with.
Well, is there an option to sort of say, we're not sure about these and we don't have the resources to actually make an absolute determination, and here are some other options in town?
You feel that the Gallup Weed near the front fence on the right is still open?
Well, I would say so. I mean, it'd be nice to go up, if I can find time, I can go up and look, but, see where the first headstones are. Because everybody they used to bury people facing the east, so.
Right.
So if there's a stone, say that's 10 feet back from the fence, that means you've got from the fence out, there should not be anybody in there, because they would be, the headstone, they'd be the other way.
Who even digs the graves in, like in Jenneville? Who does that?
Well, we only allow cremations, and so when I planted my sister a month ago, My nephew brought me her urn with the ashes, and I went up and dug the hole.
You did it yourself?
Yeah,
Okay.
I buried my own father.
Oh. Okay, so
With,
that's how
with
it works.
markers or no markers?
Yeah,
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I don't think we have a good answer for you.
But it sounds like it's a project, and it sounds like the point is we ought to figure out a way to initiate the project. And there's gonna be a cost behind it.
And how, what's the scope
Right.
of that? You know, we're talking,
But it sounds like the right thing to do.
All right, so do you want me to take this on and try to get a little bit of information? You could maybe tell me names of, or maybe I could just contact Daryl Hawkins and how much does sonar stuff, you know, that type of.
Yeah, I can't speak specifically to Daryl Calkins, I have
No,
other resources. but
I was thinking maybe you knew the other companies that do.
I do have some resources, I believe, from the VMCTA.
Yeah,
That I could share, and there's a small section of records pertaining to the cemeteries in the vault.
oh,
But it's basically duplication of what the Historical Society has,
oh, okay.
is my understanding.
well, they have a copy, you have a copy.
Right, exactly, duplication.
Well, I looked at their stuff online, that's why I know about
Yeah.
that. All right, I know this is a long discussion, I appreciate everybody's time, thank you.
so what I'm hearing, Ari, is you will do a little bit of research, maybe even apply to take a field trip. When it may be convenient, but
Yeah,
just keep us posted.
okay, all right, thank you.
Manager's update.
Clay Hill Road is done, for the most part, we still have some shoulder, hard pack to put down. We put some down in a couple of places, there was a discrepancy between driveway and surface, and a couple of driveways with about 6 inches, so we took care of that, but, Blacktop is due back, I believe, on Wednesday to finish the shoulders. We're obviously, doesn't feel like it today, but at some point very soon, the temperatures will change, so we do have an eye on the winter season as well coming up. We just, last Monday was Halloween, kind of the first post-pandemic, I shouldn't really say post-pandemic, but we were able to basically have an open trick-or-treat. It was well-received, kids were all seemed to be in good spirits, as was the parents. I understand from John, I was around until about 6 o'clock. I understand from John about 6:45 to 7. It being a Monday night, the crowd's pretty well dispersed. Kind of dispersed early, but you know, that's a midweek thing. Otherwise, I thought the turnout was good. And even the houses along Route 12 here seem to be pretty excited to have the kids back. So I think it went pretty good. Budget season is predominant right now, at least for myself and to an extent Martin. Again, we're looking or hoping to present for the 21st, November 21st meeting. And then again, conceptually on December 5th. One is kind of a macro overview. The second one is a little bit more micro. The second one also entails budget presentations from the library and the fire department. Town report is also well underway at this point. We have been receiving back some of the appropriation requests. I also put this in here because it is time to start thinking about the town manager report. And we'll be
The select board report?
Yes,
Yes, I know.
absolutely.
I've already been tapped to.
You passed the hat to Phil.
I asked Mary if she would so graciously use her incredible skills to.
Yeah, that's why he just like
She's
flatters me into
thrilled.
it.
And
She
we're
wants
going
to
to
say
do a
she's thrilled.
I'm thrilled,
free yoga with beer class somewhere.
Yes. yes.
So the appropriations, 2 of them have received, have requested or have indicated perhaps increases, so we'll wait to see what transpires there. Hartland Volunteer Fire Department, they did get the one truck in particular back in action, so we were able to bring a Scutney's back to them in one piece and on time, so we're happy about that. I believe we're still down a tanker truck, and it's the tank that, on the tanker truck that is in question. However, for the most part, we're better than we were. Sean's position has been
So
posted.
Is there like, is it out for repair, is there a time?
It is out repair, and I don't know the timetable on the second one there.
I think it's gonna be another month.
Yeah,
Cool.
It's a new tank.
so that one's been, yes. And then there's a third that I think we have gotten good news on, but there's a third truck that potentially needs axle chassis work. I believe that we're looking at rust on the chassis and perhaps it being kind of scraped down or sandblasted and repainted. I think they feel as though it's less rust than they were anticipating, so I think that that was a good sign. But that truck is not part of the two that have been kind of going back and forth.
And did we purchase and receive our forestry truck?
We have ordered it. We have not paid for it yet, and we have not received it. But it has been appropriated by the townsfolk, and we're waiting for.
So assuming all the repairs get done,
Yeah.
Is the chief satisfied that he's got the equipment he needs for the foreseeable future?
The answer is yes. I don't believe, so this will be a little bit more of a discussion on the 21st, but they do have, after the forestry truck, there is a new purchase pegged for about 2028. We do put money aside for that, and based upon the estimates, they may be a little bit stale at this point, based upon inflation. Based upon what we put into this fund between today and 2028, we project to be able to purchase that truck in 2028, including taking about $35,000 out of this fund to cover the repairs that they need to do. So they're going to cover those repairs out of basically a donation savings account, and then that will go in front of the voters in March to basically withdraw the 35 grand for the repairs that they've done. Does that make sense? Okay.
Yeah, it does. I guess I just wonder in the back of my mind, you know, do we need to do any more aggressive funding since we do have ARPA money? Right? Is this a high priority issue that we should set aside cash for? It's not a question we have to discuss now, but maybe when we get into the budget discussions, we talk about it.
Yeah, I think we'll have very rich budget discussions given the inflationary increases in some of the things coming up, so, yeah.
So in years past, the chief has put together a pretty good
Right, so
capital.
we'll see this.
He has got a really good grasp on his equipment and their needs. And I think that this is a little rare for them to run into these problems before the need to purchase, but I also think it's a little bit of a learning experience for them, that maybe they just need to budget a little bit more for the repair, for repairs rather than outright purchases.
Yeah.
So there's been some of that discussion, but the chief is pretty solid in his preparation and where he needs to be with his trucks.
Yeah. Thank you.
That's all I got.
That's it. Was there, or is there any correspondence? I'm not aware of any.
There is none.
Okay, so I missed the last meeting, so it's kind of a combination of correspondence and manager's update. But I know we had correspondence from the Mill Street folks. I know you responded to that
Yep.
correspondence. The question that still kind of works in my head, well, maybe it's two questions. First question is, I know you guys kind of improved the access road to get in there with emergency vehicles.
Yep.
From back end, right? So how long are we into this now where that bridge is, capped at 10,000? I mean, wait a year, 2 years?
So, as it stands right now, my response is, as long as it is the way it is, it's at 10,000.
Yeah,
And
well,
even,
my question's a little different. Have we had this issue for a couple of years already?
can you expand on that?
Yeah, well, let me rephrase. When did you improve that access roads to get them?
Last year at this time?
Only,
Last year, it was early December that we did the bridge work. It was actually right about now that we were finishing. It was like August, September, October that we negotiated with
okay.
the Greater Upper Valley Solid Waste District and Twin State.
So it's about a year, we're about a year in.
And then they did the repair work last December.
Yeah. And then to, like, I know you can't answer this, but do we believe that the state is gonna get to that within the next year?
So I understand through the grapevine that the state is looked upon as being a state project. I cannot give further details than that. I understand that we will hear perhaps more in the spring, and that will be very much an open communication process through the state of Vermont. And they will hold a public hearing or two prior to doing the work, is my understanding of how this may work. I've heard that, and I feel fairly definitive about that as far as going out and saying, look, this is set in stone and this is gonna happen. I have not received a letter or have spoken to a high-ranking V-Trans person that says, you know, I'm gonna lay my life down that that's gonna
We
happen.
have one here, we should have grabbed it.
But
My thought.
my understanding is that
Wrong department, but
it is on a state priority list through infrastructure money that would be picked up.
Okay. Yeah, and the reason, so where I was, naturally knew I was leading somewhere, right? So we're leading and still, you know, what would it cost to do an engineering assessment just to get the weight limit confirmed?
So, I don't even know why we would, so the highway department is very comfortable. So two things, a weight limit is also for our benefit, and knowing that
Yeah, you don't wanna-
bridge is.
Right, you don't want a truck dumping into the river, right?
Yeah, and it's got some inspections on there going back 12 years at this point that signal some things about that bridge, which is why the state has kind of looked upon this as the need to kind of pick this up based upon what that is looking at. So we feel very comfortable that driving something greater than 10,000 pounds is not to the benefit of the bridge
Right.
or the person driving the vehicle. I also don't think you're going to get a weight limit that is going to get to the weight of an ambulance, a fire truck, or anything to
Well, you
that
won't
effect.
get, they'll never get a fire truck.
So, other than the farmer, utility trucks, garbage trucks are all going through daily or weekly using Mill Street, and that seems to be working fine.
Well, using the back way, you're saying.
Mill Street Extension, I'm sorry. So I feel very good about maintaining 10,000 pound weight limit on that until that project is picked up and rehabilitated to the point that it needs to be.
The only question is the one that resident raised, in terms of if we knew the true weight limit. Now, let's say they do an engineering assessment and it's only 5,000 pounds, and the bridge isn't safe at all. Yeah, that's good to know.
So,
If they do
yeah.
an engineering assessment and they say,
But Jim, can I just interrupt for just a second?
let me finish my thought,
Yeah.
I'll lose it forever. If they do an engineering assessment and say it's 16,000 pounds, now you can get an ambulance across that bridge safely. And you reduce public safety issues there.
We're not gonna be able to get a weight limit that's gonna sustain an ambulance at 13,500 pounds. I do not, or have not heard from this resident that he has been put out in any kind of a way, from a daily business perspective, that in the 6 months since he came here for a meeting, I don't believe that his business has been interrupted to the
I'm
point
not
that.
worried about
we
the,
could-
I think, yeah, you did a great job building a new way in there, that's fine.
But, yeah, but again,
My issue is purely around
but
public
talking,
safety and
again, you
ambulance.
really want someone to back an ambulance and end up in the river, or would you rather have the
No,
ambulance
of
take
course not, that's
30
why,
extra seconds to get there and get there safely and go, you know, so
it's
it's
about a
just,
5-mile difference from that bridge to go around to get to the same point on that bridge.
Okay.
So my only suggestion, right, is, inquire about a price, of it for an engineering assessment to determine the actual weight limit.
so the strong opinion of the highway department and myself is to leave the weight limit at 10,000 pounds, of which it has been for 30 years now.
That nobody observed.
Of which it has been for 30 years. And yes, perhaps they should have been observing this. And yes, we have driven graders over it, we've driven fire trucks over it, we have driven farm equipment over it. But does that make for common sense going forward for the next 5 years? The answer is no.
Right.
And I feel very strongly with the recommendations coming upwards, in that the bridge is structurally not great. I would hate to have thought that, the fact that the tractor could have gone over that at any point in time when people weren't obeying the 10,000 pounds limit, it could have happened at any time. So why bring yourselves to that? Why not be conservative? Move forward, have the bridge work done, and get to a point that we will never get over 16,000 pounds, no matter what. So,
Well, I think the state limit's 18.
16.
In the interest of time, I'd like to cut the conversation off.
So my request is simple, just get a price for engineering assessment. And you know the answer.
Yeah.
So let's move on and take it to some other.
Okay. We need 2 motions, one to adjourn the regular meeting, and the other to start the executive session.
Do we have to acknowledge that we have future business?
We have what?
Future business on the agenda? Just
To remind you, the future agenda items include the fiscal year 22 audit report and the fiscal year 24 budget discussion.
They're primarily so I don't forget.
Well, they asked for.
Yeah,
on
just for the record.
For the CAT folks' last meeting.
Oh, how about that?
Yeah.
And do we adjourn first and then enter the executive session? We do, I make a motion to adjourn?
No, you just need to enter executive
Okay, then
session.
I make a motion that we enter executive session pursuant to 1 VSA 313A3.
All in favor? Is there a second? I'm sorry.
I'll second.
Second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Brian, it's yours.
What's that?
The
We're gonna
area
move
is
upstairs.
yours. Sorry
Yeah.
that we
We
move
kept you.
You can
Do you
then
have
go upstairs.
any sense of timeline?